Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate everyone that's watching at home, and we appreciate you being part of this Empower Roundtable, hopefully the first of many, presented by the Twin Cities Film Fest and Vuma TV. I am Miss Shannon, a comedian, radio and TV host, and all-around social instigator based here in the Twin Cities. And tonight I'm very excited to lead you through what I hope is going to be a guided conversation with our guests here. They are diverse storytellers in their own right. They are industry professionals and leaders, and we are very happy to have them join us. So I encourage them also to voice any questions throughout this broadcast if you have anything of one another, so we can all talk amongst ourselves and really get into the meat of what diverse storytelling is. So we'll jump right into the introductions. With us tonight are Missy Whiteman, David Buchanan, and Alberto Marzan. We may have a couple of other guests that join us throughout this conversation. If they do, don't worry, we will shout them out when they get here. So why don't we start with Missy? You know, Missy, Emmy-nominated writer, director, producer, multimedia artist. All of those things are absolutely amazing, and I'm honored to be here with you during this broadcast. And while I was looking through your bio, a few things in it really resonated with me. So one, it says, Missy Whiteman understands her work to be a voice for her ancestors, to foster deeper understanding and to cultivate positive change. And it goes on to say, Whiteman understands her work to be a voice for her ancestors and their untold stories of ancient knowledge. And I just thought that was beautiful. And so why did you decide to put it that way? Why is that what you do?
Well, it actually dates back to my father, who was a visual artist. So Ernest Whiteman was a visual artist, and he has a piece in the Minneapolis Institute of Art. So it's the one with the red hand, or the red steel and neon piece. And one of the things that he taught me growing up was to really incorporate our teachings into what we create, because our role as creators, as storytellers, as artists, really is about connecting with the creator and connecting with the spirit world and sending messages to the world. And right now, I think we really need a lot of messages from the other side, or especially from our ancestors,
right,
and that wisdom right now. So it's something that I've done my entire life because my dad showed me how to do it, and it's interesting to do in film, because film is such a linear art form.
Right.
And so for indigenous storytelling, it's very secular. And so that's why I love going into like 360, why I love quote unquote experimental film. And I love blending together different genres in my work.
Well, when you're talking about that different narrative and you're trying to go, well, how do we fit into what the mainstream storytellers are doing? Do you try, or do you go, I'm going to continually have to break this mold over and over and over again?
I've tried to fit into the mold pretty much my entire career, and there's just been like divine intervention. There's been different, we go here, we go left, and I have to go right.
Right.
And I've just decided in the last, maybe like 3 years, that I just want to allow the people that I work with to lead, and instead of me driving. I think it's really, when you work with a collective or a crew, it's really important to have everybody's input and help and allow them to lead in that artistic process, because if we work in synchronicity, it's really an effortless process.
All right, thank you very much, Missy. David Buchanan, you're also with us, writer, director, filmmaker. You have a number of films that are there, and you're based here in Minneapolis, so shout out for being the only one that's here that has lived there their whole life. You are an OG. I appreciate that very much.
Not anymore, though. Now I'm in St. Paul.
Now you're in St. Paul. So we appreciate that. So you've been in the industry for quite some time. You've had pretty much, when I look at your IMDb page, you've had all the jobs, all the jobs, which I appreciate, and we're talking about how you said that the first time you did your documentary filmmaking, you were like 14. So what have you learned, and as you're going, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to do this, and this is the spot that I want to be in?
Why did I stay here? I don't know. That's a good question. Because I was going to move to New York. Actually, quite recently, I was going to move there. But I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I just started getting a lot of work, and I was like, man, this money's really nice.
It's hard to leave.
Yeah,
right,
so I was like,
exactly.
I don't really know if I want to leave right now. But with that being said, there's a lot of great filmmakers here, and there's a lot of great resources. So it's like it's good to be here, but I mean, I don't know. It kind of comes and goes. I kind of think of it in good ways, and I think of it in sometimes negative ways. And it's like I still find myself like working outside of Minnesota as well.
And I thought it was cool that you said that you try to tell important and entertaining stories. So
where'd you get this bio?
I thought it was on your website. Like, you don't like it?
It is.
Is this the wrong David? I apologize. I folded. I thought this was the right David Buchanan. It could be the wrong one. There's also a football player, in case you know. So.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So, I don't think he's out there talking about trying to like tell important and entertaining stories.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think along with like kind of the messages that I am telling in the films, it's like at the end of the day, I do want people to look at it as a movie that they're entertained by, and hopefully they didn't waste an hour and a half, 2 hours of their life, and they're like, man, I was wasting my time, So, I mean, I think even just with my previous film that was actually here at Twin Cities Film Fest, premiered here and did a lot of great stuff. That movie was specifically a message for blacks, and kind of I was like, I don't care who else watches it.
Right.
But it was still, I still wanted to be entertaining because it needs to be watchable. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to just throw something up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's kind of what I mean by that.
Perfect. And then we'll come back to you in a second because I have lots of questions for everyone here.
For
So we're going to move on to the founder of Vuma TV, Mr. Alberto Marzan. Thank you again for joining us as well. So his bio is the longest of any of you guys, so don't worry. I didn't like it. I only picked part of it. When you start talking about company founder, executive, entrepreneur, award-winning career, media, technology, marketing, philanthropy, all of those things. So my question is, if you have this 20-year track record, and that's amazing, why do you go, you know what I want to do next? I want to start a streaming service, and I want it to be about these diverse storytellers. That's my next thing.
It started out just as looking at the need. I mean, there's a dire need for authentic and true stories that people like all of us around here need and demand, and we're not getting.
Right.
I mean, that's just the reality. It started out as that, and then it evolved into what it is now, something that that is impacting people globally, which is something that I'm very passionate about, and using it through what we call the most powerful medium on earth, which is entertainment content.
Right.
So those two things, marrying innovation and marrying, making an impact for our community and for everybody else, is why we are at Vuma.
Right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that, and we're very excited to watch you grow. So, one of the things that I always think is interesting, and especially when we come back to David's point, so we were talking about, you made that film, you said this was for black people.
Yeah.
So when we're deciding that we're making diverse content, how do you go, okay, this project is for this audience, or this project is to educate a broader audience?
I'm sorry.
You're okay.
Everybody is like,
I'm gonna just hold it like this.
The luxuries of live.
This is what happens when it's live. We are now going to do a close-up on Mr. Buchanan as he finds the tape. And don't worry, we didn't forget about you, Mr. Bailey. We're going to come back to you in a second, kind of thing. We appreciate you joining us. So
I'll be holding it and answer this question. Does it sound good still? Okay, cool. What was the question?
Okay, I know, we all got distracted. So we were talking about, because specifically with some of your films, and Mr. Bailey, we'll come to you in a second, because I think you might want to chime in for this question as well. So David, you talked about that film that you did that you said, well, this one was for black people, and I made it for them to enjoy. So we know that there's some projects where you go, okay, this is my heart project, it's specifically for this audience, and there's other ones where we try and educate, I call it edutainment. We're trying to educate and entertain people with another project. So how much is it your job as filmmakers to go, everything needs to be edutaining?
Well, Black was a specific case. Because Philando Castile really hit me in a certain way where it was like, I mean, there were so many black people, and then it was like, that one was like, I gotta do something.
Right.
So that's a very specific thing. If in the general overall kind of, is it our job to really educate people? I mean, no. We don't have to do anything. I can
Right.
do whatever I want. But like, I mean, there's a certain, if you want to bring your authentic self to it, and that's something that is in you to do, then that's something that you should do, because if it's a calling for you, you should do that. You know, it's kind of like years ago, I remember asking my pastor, I was like, what if I go up to accept an award and I don't thank God? Or something like that. Or should I thank God, I think I might have said. And he said, do what you feel. So it was like, you know, it's really, it doesn't, I mean, I don't know. My films always will have something like that in them, because it's more interesting that way, I think. Because if you're just watching something that's like kind of, you know, bubblegum stuff, then it's like, well,
There's a lot of bubblegum stuff out there.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
I mean,
So,
just stand in line.
Right.
I mean, just the way we look at it is, you know, I see it as more of a responsibility that we have. My family is Haitian, Dominican, and Venezuelan, as complicated as it comes. And, you know, something that I personally actively look at is, how can we talk to as many people that understand who I am, who we are, who you are, and whether it's edutainment, whether it's complete education,
Right.
or just just entertainment. We see that as a responsibility that we have. I mean, you're like completely downplaying what you do. Like, it is critically important for us to have people like you guys around, because if you look on our network now, 90% of the content is created by folks like you guys. You know, diverse storytellers that are telling true and authentic stories. We don't need bubblegum stuff. I use a four-letter word.
Right. And
So,
Missy? I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
no.
Oh, I mean, the message that I got growing up is like, whatever you create, you have to educate along with it. And I think those teachable moments are a little bit different for the indigenous community, because, you know, media was basically created to demonize us.
Right.
You look at the first printing press here in the U.S., everything was about the Dakota uprising, and gave information to farmers around here, like false information about what was actually happening. That replicates today in what's happening
Right.
here in the Twin Cities with the uprising. So for me, it's really about telling our stories in a way that is authentic to our life experience. So if you look at the human experience, it's like, my experience is definitely different than somebody else who maybe isn't indigenous.
Right.
Or, you know, really, if we want to take away the word diversity, we can call it human experience. We can call it, each person has a different perspective. Each person has a bubble. And I'm like, who am I to say that your reality is, you know, who am I to judge your reality? I'm like, this is just my reality. This is what I've been taught. And this is how the work itself educates. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you know your craft well, you know, and if you know how to present your work in a way that's educational, if you have it together, I feel like you really don't have to feel like you have to educate.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's always a mission-driven purpose in what we do, and it sounds like that's the way you approach it. It never feels, even though we put in a crazy amount of hours, it never feels like I have a job.
Right.
You know, I haven't had a job in years,
Right.
because it's like interwoven in the fabric of like who I am. And you know, that when you do that, it just comes across as real. And that is so critically important today, because if you look at what people are watching, it's you know, it's a scary situation, because there's not enough stories that are out there in public for people to consume globally.
Right, right. Well, we're going to come back to our general guests here, but we want to make sure we have a chance to introduce and welcome Mr. E.G. Bailey. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, a laundry list of things if I'm looking through your bio. So, actor, filmmaker, spoken word. I was going to say spoken word artist, but I felt like that wasn't enough. So I was like, spoken word genius, virtuoso, wizard, spoken word wizard. I thought that would work. You know, and I was looking through your bio, and I did this to everyone. And so one of the things I thought was interesting in an interview that I read with someone else that you did, you were talking about that your love of films went all the way back to when you were a kid. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I was introduced to films. I was born in Liberia in Saclay, Nimba County, which is a remote village, northern Liberia, about 3 days drive from the capital. And I think I was 6 or 7, and a group of people showed up, and they put up a screen, a sheet, and they screened some films, and they were Indian films, and I was completely fascinated, just enthralled. Didn't understand a single thing that was happening, but it didn't matter, and just fell in love with it. And then, and actually, when we went to Sundance, I happened to be riding in the shuttle with a filmmaker, and we were talking, and he explained that that there was a when Sajet Ray was doing films, they used to do that. They would go to show these films in villages in Africa, and he said that's probably what was happening. And a couple years later, there was a gentleman in our village that built a theater, and it was mud walls, and he used to show karate movies, and so we used to try to sneak in. We used to, ask anybody that would help us get in and help us tag along. And when we couldn't get in, we would drill holes in the side of the theater to be able to watch the films. But it's a dark theater, you can't, So obviously we gave ourselves away. And the gentleman, he would fill up a water bottle with hot pepper and spray it in our eyes. But
Wow.
but we were undaunted. We would just, whoever, there was a sacrificial lamb. Whoever whoever got caught first.
You're like, it's your turn.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we would do that as much as we could, and then get in any way we could. And that's when I fell in love with films. And then when I came to the States, I was in junior high school, and school would let out at 2:30, and I would leave school and run 10 miles to the movie theater that was on the outskirts of town, and catch any movie that I could see, even if it had already started. And after it was done, I'd run back home, and my parents had a rule: you had to be home by 5:30, and if you missed dinner, you didn't eat. Oh, wow. So I went many nights without food because I needed to see movies. Eventually, they got me a bicycle, so I didn't have to didn't have to run the 10 miles. But yeah, it's been ingrained in me since, and constantly watch movies, and so yeah, and started sneaking into rated R movies in junior high school.
Okay. You're like, did you learn anything from those?
Yes, the learning has continued.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
One of the fascinating things I thought, and this wasn't something that we intentionally did when we picked our guest this evening, is that you all had that common thread of this being something you were passionate about since you were little kids. So when we're talking about creating those stories for the next generation, do you think it's important for us to go, well, I want to see more representation for them in the future than I saw when I was young?
Well, I think absolutely. For me, pretty much, the work that I've done since coming to the Twin Cities has been about representation, but very consciously in film. I'm consciously trying to create new images and new representation of Black narratives. That's a conscious mission that I have, because I think Chimamanda talks about the single story, and also growing up in the 80s, 90s, there was just very stereotypical.
Right.
I think I was talking to a filmmaker the other day, and it was either menace to society or
Boys in the
like
Hood.
Boys in the, yeah.
Yep.
Or maybe something like Friday, you know,
Right,
like
right.
it was either comedy
Right.
or violence.
Right.
And that's what you had to fit in. And those aren't the kind of stories that I want to tell, because that doesn't encapsulate our community and our people. And I mean, I grew up outside of the U.S., and so, you know, I already had a different perspective when I came, and I knew that whatever the reality was here and the perspective was here, we were more expansive than that. And so, for me, in trying to represent who we are and how we live in our reality, has to be expansive to match my own consciousness. And so, for me, you know, not, I mean, you know, I have an idea for a kind of a neo-blaxploitation, well, I wouldn't call it blaxploitation. It's a neo-action film, and so obviously, you know, there's going to be some violence in that.
But I find that fascinating. Like, I was fortunate enough to do an interview with Antonio Vargas, who you know is a great actor, but most people know him from playing Huggy Bear on the old Starsky and Hutch thing. And one of the things I thought was most impactful from being on this doing this interview is talking to people who were about 10, 15 years older than I who attended. And they were just so enamored because they remembered coming home and that was one of the only faces that they saw. So even though he was still one of the good guys, so they were still really excited about, you know, because they didn't have any other role models that they had to see on TV all the time because the rest of them were worse. So the fact that we have made some of these that I think that there are lots of ways that you can make that film and turn that genre on its head.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the blaxploitation genre has some problematic aspects to it, but also it was affirming. You know, I mean, there were again, you know, being able to see yourself and providing opportunities and work, you know, and you look at, I mean, Melvin Van Peebles sort of, you know, kicked off that genre in a lot of ways, and Gordon Parks, and you know, and there are some really great films in that genre, and it's like any other genre. There's some great aspects of it, and then there's some problematic aspects.
Right.
I think, you know, usually when it's done now, it's played for comedy, but I think that there's a space in there where you can still deal with issues. Because the one thing about blaxploitation films is that they actually dealt with social issues. I mean, that was a very critical thread within those films. It was dealing with social ills, you know, as sort of outlandish as they could be and comedic as they could be. They were still addressing issues that were going on. So I think there's still a space in there where you can deal with those and look at blaxploitation in a more heightened, like a heightened reality or a hyper reality kind of way, without necessarily taking on all the negative aspects of it.
Right.
And so yeah, I feel like there's a space in there to still explore it without it being demeaning or damaging.
Right. Right. Which is probably something that all of you are trying to do, is figure out a way that you can have more representation, but have it be appropriate, because it seems like so much of what we've had before was that for us, by us mentality. So if there's going to be a quality story about indigenous peoples, you get to make it, and these are the only people that are going to go see it, so it's going to not be wildly distributed. Or this film is about this particular version of black people, so since it's not the trauma porn everybody wants to buy, we're not going to showcase it. So how do you take those next steps?
Yes, but if it's indigenous content that's produced and directed by someone who's non-indigenous, it goes straight to Sundance.
Interesting.
It goes straight to Tribeca. So that's my goal, is not only to have representation on screen, it's also a goal to have people behind camera as well, and all cast and crew be indigenous.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was one of the things we were talking about before we started tonight's broadcast, because I was talking to David and I was bringing up, I have two articles that I thought we could bring up. So we're talking about representation. So the first one we were talking about, because I'm a big geek, you know, my good friend, the executive director of our Twin Cities Film Fest, we're both geeks, we talk about this stuff all the time. And so we've talked about the story where Anthony Mackie was talking about, he was calling out the racism in the Marvel movies. And what he brought up was the fact that he'd been in 7 films, and other than going and seeing Black Panther, there was no, if you looked at the crew, what he had said is that it really bothered me that I've done 7 Marvel movies where every producer, every director, every stunt person, every costume designer, every PA, every single person has been white. So what do we do when we're going, not representation isn't only that there's more than one check the box, here's the woman, here's the indigenous, here's the black, here's the, you know, how do we go, well, we want to make sure that there's editors and there's directors and there's writers.
Here's the reality. The reality is that's not uncommon. It's been going on forever.
Right.
And we continue to talk about that specific issue. And the only way to bust in those doors is to bust them in, because they haven't let us into those rooms to make the decisions on who, you know, who can be around the table.
Right.
So I'm not interested in discussing the same stuff over and over again. You know, the only thing I'm interested in discussing is how do you bust the door down, because they actively have not let us in strategically for a long time.
Right. So how do we do that? Because if we're talking, if anybody who's watching out there are those young filmmakers. And I think another story that we have of all of our panelists is you guys were on your hustle, on your grind, but there's a lot of things where you're like, you had every job. You did everything. You did it from the grounds up. How do you find that funding? How do you figure out how to get in those doors? How do you even know how to pitch things appropriately so you can find the next thing, so everything's not always, you know, even though we've had successful Indiegogos, how does it turn into I get support outside of my community?
But I think, I mean, that's a very complicated, that's a very large,
Right.
complicated issue. But to touch on what you said, you know, it's like Ava DuVernay said, enough studies have been done. This has been discussed for 40 years. It's time to put up and shut up. It's, you know, no more, another study does not need to be done.
Right.
We all know what the reality is. So if you're really serious about it, make the change, you know? I mean, it's like what's going on right now in the Twin Cities and around the world in terms of the uprising and the protests and the shift that we're in. Not sure exactly where it's going to land, but the shift that we're in, if you're really serious, if major organizations are serious, if funders are serious, put your money where your mouth is. You know, if you're serious about diversity, invest in diversity. If you're serious about black narratives, invest in black narratives. If you're serious about empowerment and leadership, move away from the table, you know. Continue to bring people to the table. Give the funding, give the resources so that we can have our own table, so that we can tell our stories, so that we can uplift our narratives and our community. But give us the resources to do that, you know. I mean,
Here's what I'll say. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is to answer your, like, just to tailor on that. How do you move the needle? Is I think a lot of what people are seeing now and what we're all feeling. I mean, all of us. Around this this public social injustice and like the publication of that now,
Right.
is the time for those that are not in the black and brown community and want to be advocates of this community, for them to start stepping up. I'll give you a perfect example of this state here in Minnesota. I've only been here for you know, almost 6 months, but after the last 4 or 5, I would say 2 months really, you know, the governor of the state really took some what he thought were serious actions and like trying to be, you know, let's defund the police and all that stuff. In my opinion, you know, that I just think that was the elementary no-brainer approach for him to take. And the way that you become innovative and you move the needle is you start looking at, you know, how do we bring reparation to these communities? You know, for instance, I'm working with a group right now, a good friend of mine, Peter Lord, out in LA, and I are working on this education reparation bill. Why doesn't the governor of the state of Minnesota say, you know what, I get it, we're gonna put a Band-Aid on this whatever it is situation, and we're just gonna like defund the police. Okay, great. What do we do now? Why don't you actually start to empower the communities that are on the ground, that are now, again, reacting because it's the only option that we feel we have, in a way that is, that is helping, that is making you see, the other side of the table. So people have to be innovative. We have to stop BSing each other and saying, yeah, let's take, let's rebrand this company, let's rebrand that company. What does that do? That doesn't empower anybody. That doesn't, like, it's needed, but it doesn't help my nieces and nephews have a more sustainable and equal future, in the long run.
Right.
And to answer the question in short is, people need to start doing the hard work. People that are outside, white people in Minnesota, the only thing that I'm seeing differently right now is that now they're having the conversation. They're not just listening to us say, hey, here's what we want to do. What do you think?
Right.
No, so there's something happening that's a little different than, when the Rodney King situation happened. So this is not new territory.
Right.
The only thing that I'm seeing that is new is that now they are talking about it amongst themselves. But what's going to happen after that talk is done?
Right.
And that's why we need to continue to push, and you need to continue to create the content that you're creating. You need to continue to drive it home because, and as well as you, Missy, you have to be able to do this because there's a lot of people that are much younger than us counting on us winning.
Yeah. So that goes to the time that we're in right now. I mean, if we go back to Indigenous teachings, this is the 7th generation. So our belief is that we plan for 7 generations moving forward. Right now, I mean, I'm gonna point you out, David, because you're the youngest one here, and I've watched you come up from when you were a teenager. And this is what we should be doing as older filmmakers is opening that door wider for him. And this is what we should be doing for the younger generation of filmmakers who are actually producing on TikTok, are producing on different platforms right now, and validating what their stories are. Because right now, I mean, I look at TikTok and there's like an entire Indigenous youth community that's sharing their culture, sharing their language, and people are learning that way. The other part is like we are in the collapse of the empire on all levels.
Right.
All levels.
And so we're at an advantage. If we can work the way that we do, in a way where we're problem solving creatively, we're going to be able to build new systems. And really that's my goal, is to build new systems, create new networks with other like-minded filmmakers and artists and across different mediums. So I'm not only like looking at film, I'm looking at public art, I'm looking at restorative practice and bringing that into how we create films and how we create art.
The only way that we're going to do it is to aggressively try to blow down that door, because if not, we will have the same issue with Black Panther.
Right.
8%. It was 8 to 12% of the actual crew was of color, which is nothing.
Right.
And like, that's ridiculous. That happens consistently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, as someone who, I'm not nearly on the same skill as you, but like it is, I think, up to us to start asking some of those questions. Like when I was building the crew for my streaming show, I intentionally said, I'm going to hire women and people in the BIPOC community. And that's what I'm gonna ask first. And as someone that's part of this community, it still took a lot, kind of thing to go, I'm not gonna call this person that's first in my Rolodex or this other person who I know has already done it. I'm gonna keep asking and build it together. And I didn't put out a press release that said, here's what I'm looking for. I just did it. And just that's who I hired and that's who my crew is. And I'm very proud of them that that's what we got done. And I do think it's interesting when people from the prevailing media start to move in there. Like, for instance, did you guys see recently about CBS? So CBS had announced its intention to invest in more diverse programming, and they said they're going to start behind the camera. So what they said, beginning in 2021 and 22, there's that season, at least 25% of the network's script development budget will go towards projects created or co-created by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And they ain't even in the story, they put BIPOC, because we know not everybody knows what BIPOC
really
means. Yeah,
going
so they
in?
had to put, And then they said that next what they're going to do is they announced that their goal for its writers' rooms were to be staffed by at least 40% BIPOC representation, which will also begin in 21-22. And then for the following season, the goal is to increase that number by 50%.
Fox did it before. CBS has done it before. Where are we now?
Right.
That's my response to that
Exactly.
statement. I think that they're afraid that people are going to start their own
Well, of course.
television
Why wouldn't they be?
broadcasting. I mean,
They're doing is
Meet Alberto.
all they're doing is basically, you know, coming to our town, taking our goods, and then reselling it and making a profit
Yep.
because they have the infrastructure in place.
Right.
So that's just a consistent like engine that runs, and it's called Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, you're
but
absolutely right.
Hollywood is barely making it right now. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, if you we go to Netflix, right? We'll go to your streaming channel, which is remind me again.
Vuma TV.
Vuma TV.
Yes.
Like that's exciting to me. Ava's, distribution company as well. I'm like, this is amazing, and I mean, it's something that is coming out of a place where we could never, ever have dreamed. I mean, at least when I started my career as a filmmaker, I was like, I'm going to stay in art house films because that's where it's safe for someone like me.
Right.
And I never intended on moving to the narrative form. And now it's like, this is where we're at. Now we're looking at producing a feature-length film. We're looking at expanded cinema. We're looking at new media. We're looking at, something that's beyond even 2D screens.
That's awesome.
And I think too, that's part of what David and I are part of Black Film MN. We're co-founders of Black Film MN, and that's part of our mission with that is because Minnesota, even with the desire to try to have as much BIPOC crew as possible, it can be challenging. And so part of our mission with that is to try to train the next generation, or actually train anybody
Right.
that is interested at any level of the art form and in learning. And so, and those are the kind of things that we need to do. I've been saying for 5 years, there's a renaissance of Black filmmaking in Minnesota that's coming. It's something I could feel. I didn't have actual data and numbers. But since then, the number of Black filmmakers, active Black filmmakers in Minnesota has grown, and it's probably 5, 6 times what it was at that point. And and part of that is the level and the playing field. But now that there's a larger number, is now trying to raise that expertise,
Right.
so that the quality and the skill level can increase, so that David is not the only one showing up on a commercial set, so that you can have several different Black TV writers' room in Minnesota.
Right.
It needs to be done. Part of, Amiri Baraka talks about, you have to understand the tradition that you're in and understand your place in that tradition, so you can understand your place in that tradition and how you can push that tradition forward. And part of that responsibility is to mentor the next generation and grow so that the tradition can continue. If you're not doing that, then the tradition is going to get cut off at some point.
Right.
Now, I am a product of that very principle. When I came to the Twin Cities, many of the art forms I do now, I didn't do except writing. And mentors have invested into me, actively invested. And I look back and I'm like, I don't know why they did, but thank God they did.
Right.
Because I do what I do now because of their investment. So it's my responsibility to turn around and give that investment back. And if I don't, then I'm cutting off the chain. I'm
Right.
cutting off the flow of the river, and you have to carry that responsibility if you're really connected to community. Not everybody does.
Right.
Some people are in it for different reasons. I should say.
How do you continue to build that? If we're going back partially off of what you said, Alberto, about busting down those walls and creating new storylines in this narrative, how much of it do you go, here's the way it's been done and here's how we need to learn to fit into that, versus start over and create a new model?
I want to say, I think what's interesting is when somebody else is doing it, and it's not just a white male, they make better stories, or at least stories that haven't been told. So we were talking about representation, just going back to that, it's like, it's funny because when I was a kid, all I watched were black movies because my sister lived with us and she would just put all these movies on. I'm like, oh my God, I can't watch another gangster movie. Like, I can't do it. It's like too much. But then there's a variety from everybody else. So it's like when I saw Jurassic Park, I think is when I kind of knew what a movie was because I knew dinosaurs didn't exist.
Okay.
But
Well,
Yet.
well, they don't.
Yet.
They don't
Yeah.
exist yet.
they're trying to bring them
Listen.
back.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, they might. They might. But it's like if we can see different people, like let me see something else. And I feel like it is kind of happening now. But talking about the behind, the camera sort of thing. When I was, making my feature film Black, it was literally impossible to find a cinematographer who was black,
Right.
or just black people to work on set who had the kind of knowledge that I did. So it
Right.
was like, okay, this isn't gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I got 2 great black producers and a lot of great black actors.
Right.
But yeah, it's just like we really need to work on, training and getting people up to that level so that we can. And I was just interviewed for a TV show, and this is like a TV show that's coming from Los Angeles because of COVID, and they want to do it locally. And the guy specifically said to me, "It's like, David, the reason why we're talking right now is because you are black, but also I saw your reel and I knew you had the ability." It's like not seeing that from anybody else. So
Right.
I think that's an issue that we need to solve, and I think the reason why black people might not be getting into the field is because of they're not seeing the representation. And another thing too is accessibility.
Right.
Like, why aren't there a lot of black hockey players? Why aren't there a lot of black Formula One drivers? Because it's expensive. Basketball is not that expensive.
Right.
Football is not that expensive. So we need to make it more accessible for those to actually be able to access equipment,
Right.
training, things like this, because that stuff gets crazy out here. Making
Right.
movies, not cheap.
I agree with you. And I think that that's one of the things. I was talking to one of my friends who is fantastic. He's a good friend of mine. He also happens to be a white male. But he's the way they talk to us, he's one of the good ones. But the thing is that we were talking about
Tell
that,
him
and he works in the industry.
congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, you're doing the Lord's work. But I mean, we make light of it, or I make light of it, but that was part of the conversation we had is, he goes, well, aren't they going to be sacrificing quality if they say that they're just going to go based on numbers? And if the numbers aren't there, is there a way that we can help get the numbers there quicker?
What do you mean by numbers?
Well, he was saying that if they're going,
Don't
well,
tell
all
me
we have
it's
to.
like the Hollywood thing that black films don't travel.
No, it was more of if we're saying they need 25% of them to be that one, that's no longer hiring the person that's most qualified for the job. And I said, well, it takes a while for those people to get those skill set. They haven't been offered that skill set so far.
Complete BS.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is enough talent.
Okay.
That is diverse talent, and I'm speaking about not just cultural or ethnical diversity. I'm also talking about gender diversity.
Right. So we can get there.
Yes. Oh, you
Okay.
kidding me?
All right.
I mean, this whole BS that the Oscars and Hollywood has been on regarding
Right.
gender diversity, the numbers haven't changed in forever.
Right.
But however, they got the media engine behind that, and all of a sudden you see films that are produced by or directed by females. There's a tremendous amount of talent on the other side of the table, whether it's gender-wise or cultural-wise. That's BS.
Okay.
I mean, you might have that argument for Minnesota.
Okay.
But as far as industry-wide, it is complete BS.
Okay.
And it's the excuse that has been used again and again. And it's an excuse that was used in education. It's an excuse that was used in business. It's we can't have black CEOs because, we got to find the qualified people.
Right.
That's nonsense.
Right.
Yeah.
Look at so we have offices in Europe, and we work. So our head of content strategies in Paris, so I'm fortunate enough to be pre-COVID. I was living between two continents,
Right.
and the amount of talent. We have an office in Lagos, Nigeria. The amount of talent that is around the globe we get to see it at Buma because
Right.
that's how we work and live. We live globally.
Right.
It's just that just infuriates me.
Right.
There's the same argument regarding the CEOs or executives. Same argument goes with developers and in tech. So then my girl Morgan at Blavity created, you know, Afrotech, and they're killing it. So it's not like there's not talent and qualified people, it's that they just use that as an excuse.
Yeah.
There's not investment
Okay.
into the talent.
Correct.
So that and not access not given to the talent.
Right.
That's the problem. I mean, you can throw a pebble and you can hit black
Right.
filmmakers.
Qualified.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very, very upscale writers, producers in front or behind. You name it. That's
Yeah.
BS.
It's definitely a Minnesota thing because when I
Right.
was in New York working, there was only one white guy on set. Like,
Right.
he was the only one. Otherwise, it was me. It was an Asian guy. It was a black Mexican guy. It was a dude from somewhere in Europe. I don't remember where, but he talked funny.
I tried to live outside of the Minnesota.
Exactly. Yes, it works.
I have
And
to
Missy,
fly-
do
I
you
have-
find?
Yeah, I have to fly people in to work with here.
Yeah.
So just getting back to like even the communities and stories that are represented, I want to also acknowledge my Two-Spirit relatives, LGBTQ2, yes.
IA plus, IA plus, yes.
These youngins change it up.
We
on
changed
me
our
all the
initialism,
time.
but I'm not mad at them because we changed our initialism, right? We just added 2 more letters and,
Yeah.
and correction them. So I like the evolving initialism. So,
But I think it's really important to acknowledge all communities if we're talking about representation in film. Because I have friends who are Indigenous and Two-Spirit who have produced amazing films that don't get screened. Because there isn't a subcategory to Indigenous film that's Two-Spirit. And so for me, like when I curate film series, I make sure that there's representation from our Two-Spirit community too. But getting back to like 7th generation, how do we do this? And so we're building for the next 7 generations.
right.
Moving on, we look at like old school. You know, what comes to mind is like Giacometti. You know, the painters apprenticeship. You know, to really take on and mentor younger filmmakers. Like bring them with you to set, bring them with you to different events, bring them with you. You know, let them into your private life. I mean, to some extent.
Right.
And you know, allow them to see your life and your work and how it intertwines, because you're not just like a filmmaker. Turn it on, I'm a filmmaker. And
Right.
then turn it off, I go home. It's like those of us that are parents, you know, it's like we are like, I can remember editing and having a kid with the stomach flu, and it was like, okay, edit. Here's a deadline. Go throw up. You know, I mean, it was literally like, you know, doing it all at once.
Right.
And so that's also something that we have to take into consideration when we're working with filmmakers who may not have access, is because like life gets in the way. You know, life happens.
Yeah.
And there isn't room for our children, there isn't room for our personal life to be a part of the industry, because we're supposed to be robots that produce in a certain way. And
I see
yeah.
I mean, I see it different. I think you guys have such, you know, you guys have such a huge wave of momentum right now as just filmmakers. I mean, just even being here in Minnesota. I mean, seriously, there's you have so much power in the whole movement that is going on right now that we live every single day.
Right.
But now the world is starting to see as a movement. You guys here, specifically in the Twin Cities, have this outrageous opportunity to show the world what your lives and your projects are.
So Alberto, as we get ready to start winding down, okay, so maybe we feel that, like I feel that too, a little bit of, okay, people are paying attention now. How do we capitalize on it? Like, what's the next step to get the projects developed and to get to those next layers? How do we start creating access? What do we do with that momentum?
Well, I think first, I think it's by any means necessary.
Okay.
That's the first. You know, I was having a conversation with Craig Rice, you know, stalwart in the community, phenomenal filmmaker. And access is important, but when I talk to young folks that are interested in being mentored, one of the things, and you know, he touched on it, is passion. You have to have the passion. You know, you have to be willing to run 10 miles to go see a movie.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, it's true
Yeah.
though.
Yeah,
gotta
because
be
you
willing
can't,
to, you can't take no for an answer.
Right.
well, and you can't do this work without. y- It's so difficult. I mean, it's so difficult and daunting, and it's like scaling Everest to get a film done sometimes. And you have to have the commitment and the passion to do it. So to me, that's first. If you have that, you will find mentors, and you will figure out how to do it, and and then I think the third level, if you have the mentality of I'm going to do it no matter what. My first film, New Neighbors, was made for less than $2,500, and it got into Sundance. And
But that's a different level of commitment, though. You know, that's what you need. You need somebody like that understands that there's ain't nobody gonna help you.
Right.
right,
Okay,
and
nobody's gonna help you. You gotta move the ball along on your own.
Right.
You know what it is too? It's like somebody asked me, they were like, they said, is breaking in hard because you're black? And it's like, no, it's breaking in is hard just because it's hard.
Right.
It's not, it's like, I mean, there's an extra level to it. Like if I was, I mean, being black doesn't help when you gotta like talk to a bunch of white people who don't understand you, and then it's just like, oh my God, I either gotta turn down the blackness or I just gotta be like, I don't care.
Right.
Which great now because I'm making some bread, so I don't give a yeah, trying to keep it
Precisely.
PG.
Precisely.
PG.
Yes. We feel you, David. We feel
But
you.
it's like, you know, with that being said, though, it's like the thing is like this business is incredibly difficult no matter what. It's like you do got to have the passion for it. And also, it's like talking about mentors. I had some phenomenal mentors who helped me with writing, who helped me with lighting, who put me on commercial sets where I could work on big, like Target, Best Buy, things like this, where there's, you know, thousands of, I mean, I've been on
Right.
sets where there was like $1 million being spent on a movie, and it's like I had a key position where it's like if I mess up, it's like it's gonna mess this whole thing up, and you know, it's like, but getting there was like, do I want to do this? Because number one, it don't pay at first.
Right.
It sucks, and
Right.
it's long days. These are 16-hour days, and it's like, you know, it's like when's the second meal coming because I'm hungry.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But if you have that drive and you can go for it, just, you know, you'll win.
I think
Right.
I think I'm a product of mentoring as well, so I understand the power behind that, and it's just how I live my life.
Right.
Because I grew up, you know, with strong men and women mentoring me, and I don't know that we can say enough about where we are today and really taking the responsibility of saying there's a bunch of like little kids that are waiting for us to win.
Right.
And that is it's mentoring through osmosis almost, because we just won't get ahead with people like us sitting around the table going, okay, it's not going to be easy, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Right.
And it's not easy no matter what color you are. It's just harder if you're of color or if you're underrepresented in Hollywood.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else? We do have to wrap up, unfortunately. So, do you have anything you'd like to leave our first Empower audience with before we wrap up today?
well, I think you asked several times, and I don't know if we really addressed it, which is the question of accessibility, and
Right.
what do we do now to kind of address that? You know, I think part of it is collectivizing.
Okay.
If it's not a word, I just made it up. And
I understood
We
you.
appreciate it. Yeah. I want to write it down right now. You can have it. Okay.
I'm a poet.
Yes.
So, you know, that is part of the momentum, and that is part of the opportunity that we have now, is coming together as a collective, and that's part of why with Black Film and Men we're doing that. And then it's to go to the powers that be, whatever you want to call them, whether it's funders or whether it's these studios, and, you know, really putting their foot to the fire and pushing them to really show up if they're really serious. And to me, and I keep saying that because that's the bottom line, you know? You can talk diversity all you want, and it's been talked to death. So
You're going to
do
trigger
it,
me.
right.
I mean,
Right.
I don't
Do
wanna
it
hear-
or not. And
Right.
if you're not going to do it, don't waste my time.
Exactly.
Because actually we don't have a lot of time.
Right.
You know, and so so that's to answer the question. Get together with whoever you can, continue to create your work, but also get together to, you know, however you can get in front of people that have access and push them to open that door.
Right.
You know, and you do that. And then in terms of, you know, just to the filmmakers out there or to audience members out there, is tell your story, be authentic, be truthful to who you are, where you come from. And that is the most powerful thing that you can do. It is in some ways the idea of think local, be global, you know, because like you said, diversity is just another word for humanity,
Right.
you know, and really this is about humanity. I mean, I love the French New Wave. That was like one, you know, and powerful films have been made by everybody in, you know, of all walks of life. And film is the most, to me, one of the most democratic art forms. Because you have to be cooperative. The baseline is you have to be cooperative. But it also, you can come from any walk of life and do film. Whatever experience you have, every experience that you've ever had from as long as you can remember, it can be incorporated into your filmmaking. It is useful material for your filmmaking, even if it's not, doesn't go into the content and you're you know, behind the scenes. All of it is useful. Every experience you've ever had is useful to the filmmaking process, you know. And I consciously trained myself, prepared myself. I did every discipline I could because I always said my final destination is film. And all this time, whether I can make films now, don't have access, whatever, I am training to be a filmmaker. And when the day comes that I can make a film, I will have this knowledge that I will be able to apply. Because filmmaking, you're bringing together the best artisans of every discipline to make something, and you pray to God that you can all somehow come together and make it right. But you're finding the best people with every role in a filmmaking process to make this thing. And so, you know, whether you come from, you know, sewing fabric, you do costuming. If you draw, do storyboards. There is a place for you in film, however you want to do it. And you can do it at any point in your life. You know, I took almost 8 years off and came back to filmmaking. You know, so.
And then he got into Sundance. And then he got cocky.
Trust me.
Yeah.
Cocky is the least thing I am.
You can be proud. We are proud of you.
No, I want to say educate yourself about the systems. Educate yourself about the industry, the history of the industry. And if you're working with organizations, understand how they run. Understand, you know, ask why. Why is there red tape? Who's in charge? What I've learned is like there really is they, them. There's no they, them.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well, we are very
Here's-
fortunate to have all of you
Here's what
in.
I say. I'm going to interrupt you because
Okay.
this is important to me.
Okay,
I'm
no,
sorry.
I got it. I'm gonna take a
So,
drink.
here's what's going on is that it's absolutely ridiculous that Breonna Taylor's killers are still free and out there, and this needs to be addressed immediately. So you guys, you know, call this number.
Right.
If you can get activated around, you know, around this is critical. I mean, this is real stuff.
Right,
Not to say another four-letter word.
right.
And you know, because if it was me, I'd be sentenced by now.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
this is absolutely just astonishing that this is still happening out there. That's number one.
Right.
The second thing I'll say is that, you know, you guys, filmmakers here in Minnesota, have a tremendous ally in the Twin Cities Film Festival. You know, we've partnered with them aggressively because we believe in the infrastructure that they're building here, and we want to be part of innovative companies and organizations and solution thinkers like that. So, you know, I'm super impressed with what they're doing, and you know, we continue to champion you guys as film producers and creators, because we as a network need that. And you know, If we can champion you and support you and do whatever we can because we need these stories to come out, you know, we will.
Right.
So that's in short. That's what I'll say.
I think
Can I
that's
just
wonderful.
Say, can I say one
Yes.
thing? This is really important. So,
Yes.
for anybody listening to this, we're not just talking here. We are
Right.
going to be doing trainings, and I am a part of an organization now. We just got our name, Speak Minneapolis, went from Be Fresh Productions to Speak Minneapolis. So we are like the new stewards of the city of Minneapolis for public access, and we will also be giving access, and we specifically want to make sure that we get different kinds of people in there, not just whatever.
Right.
And so Black Film MN, Speak Minneapolis, please look us up because we definitely are going to start doing trainings. We're gonna teach all the skills professionally, and you're going to be able to get on set, make some money, and make a career out of it. But you do got to be serious. 'Cause
Right.
If you're not serious, it isn't going to work anyways.
Right.
Right.
And Missy, how do people
but
get a hold
that's
of
it.
you as well?
Social media, Missy Whiteman, it's a unique name. I'm also a youth media trainer, so I primarily work on reservations with young people, and my goal is to build an army.
Right.
Nice.
The end.
I'm in.
Yes.
Just tell me
Let's
what you
do
need.
it. Yep, mobilize.
I am honored and blessed to have all of you as our guests this time. We appreciate you. We hope that you come back soon, and we're very excited for all of the projects that we know you guys are working on right now. We're excited to see Vuma TV as well. This has been great, and I really hope that we get to have you back very soon on our next Empower roundtables. We plan to continue this as well. So thank you to all of our guests. Thank you to everyone out there for watching. We appreciate and need all of you, and we plan to continue to amplify all of these stories. You can always find out more information on our Empower Roundtables and everything going on with the Twin Cities Film Fest by going to our website, twincitiesfilmfest.org. And hopefully, we'll see you next time.